Welcome to our channel. When Buckingham Palace summoned senior members of the royal family for an emergency meeting, whispers of betrayal and chaos echoed through the palace walls. But no one could have predicted the brutal secret that was about to be revealed, especially by the royal figure thought to be the most steadfast Princess Anne. It all began before dawn. A series of urgent phone calls shattered the silence of the royal quarters, waking each family member from their uneasy slumber. The Queen's private secretary delivered the message with a grave tone. Her Majesty requests your immediate presence. No negotiations. As the pale, cold sky began to envelop, London black cars carrying William, Catherine, Harry, and Camilla silently passed through the palace gates. Each one arrived carrying an air of unease, though none spoke it aloud. In their eyes, suspicion, worry, and something darker, ambition. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was suffocating heavy. Footsteps echoed down the vast corridors as assistants hurriedly prepared the meeting room, avoiding the gaze of the royal members who gathered in awkward silence. How do you feel about this story? Leave a comment with a 1 if you'd like to explore the secrets waiting to be uncovered in today's tale. And don't forget to click like. William stood tall but tense, his jaw clenched as Catherine gripped his hand a little too tightly. Harry stood off to the side like a faded shadow of himself, clearly uncomfortable with the people he now had to share this moment with. Then Camilla entered, still exuding her usual confidence, though her eyes betrayed a nervousness she could barely hide. Minutes passed, and finally she appeared. Princess Anne entered last, her footsteps echoing on the polished stone floor, steady and unwavering, never glancing at anyone as she made her way into the room. She tightly gripped a sealed envelope, a detail no one dared to comment on, but everyone noticed. Her sharp, determined gaze briefly passed over Charles before she sat down in silence. In that brief moment, something changed. A silent warning swept across the table like a shadow. Meanwhile, outside those ancient stone walls, reporters gathered like vultures, their cameras poised, questions ready. The journalists sensed that something was amiss, but could only guess at the reason for this urgent royal gathering. Some speculated it was a health issue. Others whispered about abdication, but no one dared to imagine the truth that would devastate the monarchy like a storm. Palace servants, those who had served the crown for decades, admitted they had never seen such visible fear on the faces of the royal family, not even during Diana's darkest days. When Anne finally placed the envelope in front of her and closed her hands, an eerie silence filled the room. It wasn't anticipation. It was foreboding. Nevertheless, despite the tension in the air, no one dared speak first. Everyone waited for someone to break the spell. But Anne's gaze remained fixed ahead, unmoving like a soldier ready for battle. Yet none of those sitting around the large wooden table could comprehend the weight of the revelations Princess Anne was about to make, nor the target she would aim at. As the royal family exchanged cold pleasantries, Princess Anne's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a knife. Enough. Her next words made the room fall silent, and Camilla's face betrayed a visible panic. Her command rang heavy in the air, freezing the murmurs and light-hearted laughter that had earlier served to ease the tension. Even King Charles, who had been staring down at the table as if wishing the matter would end before it even began, jolted upright, his mouth slightly agape. Anne, the one they had always viewed as the most steadfast, The most cold-hearted had chosen to speak first, and there was no mistaking the fury in her tone. Slowly, deliberately, she stood up from her chair. Her fingers no longer rested on the sealed envelope. Instead, they gripped the edge of the table as she leaned forward, her gaze never leaving Camilla. "You've turned this family into a joke." She began each word sharp and deliberate, like daggers cutting through the silence. Camilla shifted in her chair, her face a reflection of both resolve and deep fear. As the others turned to look at her, no one gave Camilla the chance to object. With unwavering determination, Anne declared what no one had dared to say: that Camilla had been holding secret meetings with senior palace aides, meetings that even King Charles was unaware of. The purpose of these meetings, according to Anne, was to usurp William and Catherine's influence within the family and the royal institution. Gasps echoed around the table. William's hands clenched, his knuckles turning white against the polished wood, while Catherine's eyes shone with disbelief. Even Harry, who had distanced himself from palace intrigues, sat up straight, a rare fire igniting in his eyes. Camilla's mouth opened as if to protest, but Anne silenced her with a swift gesture of her hand, continuing her unyielding exposé. Anne revealed that Camilla's scheme didn't stop at undermining William and Catherine. According to documents she had gathered, Camilla's true ambition was far bolder. She sought to pave the way for her grandchildren, ensuring they would rise above the traditional line of succession. What began as mere rumors about influence had transformed into a full-fledged plot threatening to upend the very monarchy itself. The room fell into a heavy silence, no one daring to move. Every gaze was fixed on the two women at the heart of this storm. Anne steadfast and relentless, and Camilla, for the first time, trapped in a snare she could not explain away. But Anne was not finished. What she revealed next would shatter any remaining trust in the room. Princess Anne not only spoke, but came with proof. With trembling hands, she placed sealed letters on the table, each one containing irrefutable evidence of Camilla's conspiracy. For a brief moment, the room seemed to freeze in disbelief. The sound of the letters falling onto the polished wood echoed louder than any voice. Anne held her head high, speaking with the cold precision of someone who had waited far too long for this moment. She revealed the first letter unmistakably written in Camilla's hand. In it, Camilla outlined her vision, a carefully calculated plan to completely eliminate William, painting him as unworthy of the throne, while quietly positioning her own grandchildren to inherit directly. The cruel words were written with chilling clarity. Gasps echoed around the table. Catherine raised a hand to her mouth, her face pale as the truth began to unfold. William's jaw clenched, a flush of anger rising in his face. His gaze fixed on Camilla, who now sat still, her fingers gripping the armrests tightly. Anne didn't stop. She pulled out the next letter. This one was even more shocking. It detailed secret payments made to palace aides in exchange for their silence, and more terrifyingly, their complicity. The sums were enormous, with promises of offshore accounts and future favors for those who played their part. In another letter, subtle but unmistakable threats appeared, threats clear enough to understand. One sentence underlined for emphasis read, "There is a way to remove obstacles." William's fury was now almost uncontrollable. His hands clenched tightly, his eyes locked on Camilla. Charles sat motionless, his face drained of color, as he instinctively placed a hand over his chest, trying to steady his breath. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound emerged. The sense of betrayal, raw and blatant before his eyes, seemed to rob him of his strength. Around him, his family sat frozen, each one caught in the judgment-laden pages, each word sinking deeper into their hearts. Finally, Camilla broke the silence, her voice trembling as she tried to dismiss the letters as forgeries. But even she knew her argument was no longer convincing. The handwriting was unmistakable. The signatures beneath confirmed what no denial could erase. Camilla's confidence shattered as she looked around the room, realizing she had no allies among the faces of shock and fury staring back at her. But those were just words on paper. The next revelation from Princess Anne would shake the very foundation of the monarchy. What Anne revealed next pulled back the curtain on secret meetings in the shadowy corners of the palace, where power, ambition, and betrayal intertwined in the darkness. Her voice lowered but remained sharp, carrying a threatening weight, as she described how she had tracked Camilla on 3 separate occasions. Not by chance, not by coincidence, but because something in Camilla's movements, the whispered conversations with staff, the sudden disappearances betrayed her. Anne's words painted a chilling picture. On late nights, when even the guards began to grow sleepy and the cameras seemed to fall silent, Camilla would sneak away, vanishing into narrow corridors that few even remembered. Anne spoke of seeing Camilla enter rooms locked deep within the palace, a wing that seemed abandoned where she met with powerful figures who should never have been there. There were influential tycoons' names long associated with scandals the palace had worked tirelessly to conceal, and former palace staff who had been fired long ago for suspected disloyalty. These meetings were not casual visits, Anne emphasized, but meticulously planned gatherings hidden from all official records held in the shadows, with low voices and eyes ever watching the door. The family sat in silence as Anne described what she had heard on those nights. The carefully crafted plans, nearly invisible for adjusting the line of succession, were discussed as if they were simply moving furniture. Advisors spoke of how to manipulate public opinion, how to discredit William, how to weave a story that would make Catherine appear unworthy. Nothing was left out. Every step, every risk was weighed with cold calculation. Then a detail that made the entire room tremble. The loyal witnesses Anne had skillfully convinced to speak up reported seeing cash-filled bags exchanged after these meetings, brought in by assistants and taken out by men. Anne said, "You would never want to cross them." Untraceable payments passed in silence, swallowed by the darkness. Anne's voice faltered slightly as she admitted the nausea she felt witnessing it all. She had stood in the shadows, clutching the envelope now lying on the table before them, wondering if she had the strength to recount what she had seen. But now, as all eyes turned toward her, and Camilla clearly faltered, she brought it forward with dark certainty. Yet even as the evidence mounted, the most personal shock had yet to come. A revelation so intimate that it left the family struggling to breathe. Just when the royals thought they had heard it all, Princess Anne pulled out something no one had anticipated. Letters written by Diana herself, hidden by Camilla for years. As Anne's hand brushed over one final letter in the envelope, the room seemed to shift, the attention sharpening, focused on the table, as she spoke with a voice that trembled not from weakness, but from suppressed anger. These letters, she said, were not ones drafted in the palace offices or read under cautious eyes. These are Diana's personal handwritten words. The words Anne had found in Camilla's private office, hidden among false drawers and locked boxes. The silence in the room deepened as Anne explained how she had stumbled upon them, but then driven by a nagging suspicion she couldn't ignore. The letters dated from the final years of Diana's life. Some were written hastily, others almost penned in agony. In them, Diana confessed fears she had kept hidden even from her closest loved ones, fears that Camilla's ambitions were not limited to Charles, and that one day she would find a way to undermine Diana's children. So, what do you think of this dramatic story? Did Diana foresee the dark plots within the royal family? Share your thoughts in the comments below this video. If you agree, don't forget to leave a comment with the number 2. If you have a different perspective, leave number 5. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss more exciting and unexpected videos. Anne's words landed like direct punches. The first letter she read aloud described Diana's increasing certainty that her sons were in danger not from enemies outside the palace gates, but from within the family itself. "Remember my words," the letter read. "She won't stop until she gets what she believes is hers, and it will cost William and Harry everything if no one sees it." In that moment, William could no longer hold himself together. He bowed his head, his shoulders trembling, and when he finally spoke, his voice cracked under the weight of it all. She knew. The words came out as a whisper, but they cut through the silence like a scream. Catherine grabbed his hand, but even her hand was trembling. Across the table, Camilla lost all composure. Her cheeks flushed with anger, disbelief coloring her face as she repeatedly denied ever seeing those letters. She insisted they must be forgeries planted to frame her, adamantly claiming she would never have kept them, let alone hidden them. But Anne's response was to open the next letter and continue reading aloud. Diana's handwriting, unmistakable, stared back at them all, each unique phrase, each signature clearly marking every page around the table. The family's reactions erupted into chaos. Charles, his hands visibly shaking, leaned back in his chair, as though even the air itself had betrayed him. Catherine's eyes welled with tears. She no longer tried to hide them, while Harry stared, his face a mix of fear and bitter realization. The entire room became a storm of sighs, stifled sobs, and uncontrolled anger. Every word Anne read aloud seemed to crack the fragile facade of this family a little more. And still, the most shocking revelations were yet to come. Anne's final piece of evidence would leave Camilla with no escape. Anne had turned this meeting into a trial, laying out a series of transactions that revealed the extent to which Camilla had gone to buy power and influence. The soft sound of pages turning gave way to a thunderous silence, as Anne opened another set of documents, this time with a final decisiveness no one dared interrupt. What she revealed next stripped away the last layer of illusion surrounding Camilla's scheme. A secret trust fund hidden for years beneath the cover of shell companies and fake names quietly registered in Camilla's name with a balance reaching millions. Anne's voice remained steady as she listed the dates of the deposits, each tied to key moments in the family's political adjustments. The origins of the money made everything even more troubling. Anne disclosed that this trust had been funded by anonymous supporters linked to controversial figures, those who had been cast aside by the palace. Individuals with histories of corruption and scandal, but suddenly they had been lifted by Camilla. Gasps filled the room once again as Anne connected these shadowy names to events now seen in a much darker light. But she didn't stop there. Anne's next blow landed with full force. The money not only filled Camilla's accounts, but was directly traced to royal aides, those who until this moment had sat comfortably in their trusted roles as loyal companions. Payments had been made to their families. Mortgage loans were paid off in a single night. Unexplained bonuses were quietly sent, all in exchange for their silence and complicity. The tension escalated as Anne presented bank statements showing large sums transferred to the guardian of Camilla's grandchildren. Each deposit was timed perfectly as her secret plan progressed, aimed at positioning her grandson on the throne. Catherine raised her hand to her mouth once more as William leaned forward. His gaze was completely fixed on Camilla, and then the final blow landed. A set of offshore accounts was slammed onto the table. Their existence was undeniable. The evidence had been stamped and confirmed, revealing a web of deceit that stretched further than anything this family had ever imagined. Even the assistants standing along the walls of the room shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to meet Anne's eyes. Charles sat as if turned to stone, his breath shallow and his face ashen, teetering on the edge of collapse. William's fury was now completely unmasked, his eyes narrowing sharp as a knife locked onto Camilla, who no longer attempted to justify herself. But Anne's most devastating blow was not yet over. A final ultimatum no one could have predicted. As the family stared at Camilla in stunned silence, Anne delivered the final crushing strike. "Leave quietly or I will take it public." Her words fell like a hammer, shattering any remaining resilient facades in the room. Anne's voice, steady yet filled with fury, carried an authority that no one dared to negotiate with. For the first time, Camilla's carefully constructed and fiercely protected power began to crumble before everyone's eyes. Anne leaned forward, her gaze unwavering, declaring that under no circumstances would she allow Camilla to continue holding power. The evidence was too clear, the betrayal irredeemable, and Anne would ensure that justice was served, even if it meant exposing the entire scandal to the unforgiving light of the public. Anne wasn't merely threatening. She was promising to do it. Her words rang with resolute determination. Even the bravest among them found it hard to look up, as if bracing for what was to come. To Anne's left, Catherine sat upright, her chin lifted in solidarity. William gave a decisive nod, his jaw tight, but his eyes blazing with the same unyielding resolve as Anne. Across from them, Harry's face reflected a more complex emotion. A storm of emotions kept him rooted to his seat, his hands clenched into fists, yet he did not rise to defend Camilla. And then there was Charles. He sat as though drained of all life, frozen by what he could no longer deny. The king's gaze shifted repeatedly between his sister and his wife, but no words escaped him. Not a single word of objection, not even a whisper left his lips. In that moment, his silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. It was an admission of failure, a surrender to the unstoppable force that Anne had become. But it was Camilla's reaction that cut the deepest. For the first time, she seemed completely shattered. Tears began to stream down her cheeks as she broke into sobs, pleading with Anne, begging them all for mercy. She said she hadn't meant to go this far, that her actions had been driven by fear, by desperation. But Anne remained unmoved. Her determination never wavered. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. And as Anne gathered the files and prepared to leave confident that everything had been decided, Camilla muttered something under her breath, sparking a final confrontation that left the entire room in stunned silence. With tears staining her cheeks, Camilla stood up, her voice trembling, yet filled with defiance, revealing something so shocking that even Anne fell silent. The silence following Anne's ultimatum seemed unbreakable until Camilla herself shattered it. Slowly, she rose, her hands shaking, yet her eyes burned with an unusual pride. She locked her gaze with Anne and spoke. What she said turned the room upside down. Through the stifled sobs, her determination broke through as Camilla declared that she had never schemed for power out of greed. No, she said every step she had taken was to protect the monarchy from itself. Her voice now grew stronger, though still trembling with anger and despair. She accused William and Catherine of being too naive, falling prey to outside manipulators, those who sought to weaken the family's influence and divide its foundation. She claimed she had seen it long ago before anyone dared admit it, and she decided to act quietly and decisively before it was too late. According to her, placing her own blood into the line of succession was not a betrayal, but a necessary safeguard, a way to ensure the crown remained in the hands of those she could trust, keeping it far from what she called the poison lurking beyond these walls. Every bribe, every secret meeting, every hidden account, she justified them all as necessary sacrifices to protect the monarchy from destruction. She denied harboring any ill will toward anyone in the room. "Do you think I did this to hurt you?" she cried. "Do you think I want to see you suffer? The thing I am trying to protect is slipping away and you're all blind to it?" To her, she wasn't the villain, but the protector of the family, the only one willing to get her hands dirty while everyone else pretended nothing was wrong. For the first time, Anne hesitated. She scoffed at Camilla's words, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes, a small crack in her armor. Despite her hatred for the betrayal, something in Camilla's raw confession struck a chord with her. Around them, the family fell into chaos. Some members began to whisper their loyalties, wavering between Anne's relentless pursuit of justice and Camilla's emotional pleas. Harry lowered his gaze, seemingly torn, while Charles sank deeper into his chair, trapped between shock and something close to surrender. And when the dust settled, Princess Anne turned to her brother, delivering a final cold statement that sealed Camilla's fate and the next chapter of the monarchy. In the ensuing silence, the royal family was left to confront the damage. Not just their public image, but the very foundation of their existence. and Anne's final words still echoed in the air. Never again. One by one, each family member rose from the table, unable to endure the weight of each other's gaze. No words were exchanged as they stood each stepping into the hallway, as though fleeing the very ghosts that had haunted the room. Even the sound of footsteps became too loud, too intrusive, compared to what had just transpired. Charles was the first to vanish completely, his heavy shoulders, face pale and ashen. Not a single glance was exchanged as he disappeared down the hallway, locking himself in his private room. No words were spoken. His silence was the testimony that tonight had broken him utterly. Even his most loyal aides dared not follow. Camilla stood motionless for a long time before gathering herself. There were no final pleas, no farewells, no justifications. Her head bowed, her eyes fixed solely on the floor. She silently left the palace. What awaited her beyond the gates no one dared to imagine, her future now as uncertain as the monarchy she had once tried to reshape. William and Catherine lingered a little longer, their hands finding each other naturally. They didn't speak, but their proximity said everything. Though shaken, they remained united. They turned and walked away, their movements synchronized, a silent vow passing between them to protect whatever was left of the family from sinking into such chaos again. However, Anne remained. Long after the others had gone, she stayed seated, her gaze fixed on the empty table where secrets had been torn apart and trust shattered. The file still lay before her, no longer open but no less potent. Her determination was unshakable, her expression etched with the same cold steel that had carried her through this confrontation. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But she had made her choice, and she had rewritten the royal rules forever. As the palace gates closed behind them that night, the outside world remained blissfully unaware of the storm that had passed. But for those within, nothing would ever be the same again. So what do you think about the secrets that were revealed? Will this change lead to a major turning point for the monarchy? Share your thoughts in the comments below this video. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest content. We'll see you soon in our next dramatic and unexpected video.